speaking, can you just give them a tingle on your glass? It kills people's flow.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Knowles. So welcome. 10 minutes.
Yep.
And a bell or a suggestion with 2 minutes to go, just to make sure you're aware of the time. And if you wish us to ask you questions, please consider that in your presentation and the time. So welcome, sir, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman and councillors. You've got my hand out, or just about to get it. My submission is to support the proposed dam only on the condition that it proceeds with the strict environmental conditions in place on the farmland is to receive the irrigation water. So the next paragraph I've probably skipped over because it was covered in my my initial submission. So really the purpose of this submission is to encourage the Regional Council to embrace the RWSS along with the strict environmental conditions and the challenges it presents, and to present some ideas on how the possible nutrient contamination could be mitigated, and hopefully if these ideas come to fruition, it will enhance the reputations of the region as a top quality food producer. So really I've got a few items here which they're basically just suggestions on how I see the Regional Council taking a leadership role and demonstrating really to farmers in the area on how they could go about altering their farming practice simply to make it more environmentally acceptable. And the first off is to simply the establishment of demonstration farms. And the idea of this is it would be to perfect best practice for current primary industries in the proposed catchment area, along with the adoption of alternative farming practices, for example, biological or organic farming methods, new technology with fertilisers and so forth. With livestock operations, including dairying, to my mind, the most important aim will be to determine stocking rates that do not lead to nitrate pollution of groundwater. And with dairying, you'd certainly want to look at the options offered by sheep and goat to see if that will be a better way to go from an environmental perspective versus cow dairying. Such a farm, demonstration farm, it could be made up by a series of land blocks in conjunction with private landowners within the area representing the different primary industries present, and would need to be established ASAP so that some results are forthcoming before the dam is completed. And funding for such project could be had from MAF, the Sustainable Farming Fund, or perhaps AgMart. Flick over the page. I'd like to see the trialling of new crops that are much more environmentally friendly across the catchment, and in particular tree nut crops would appear to offer much potential for the region. Such crops are walnuts, hazels and chestnuts, and all three have a proven presence in the region already, even if it's only on a very small scale. Our climate enables the production of top quality nuts that few regions in the country can match. All three crops have very minimal fertiliser requirement, so nutrient leaching is practically non-existent, and provided they are established with a pasture sward cover, topsoil runoff and wind erosion is virtually non-existent. However, despite the fact that these are deep-rooted crops, they still demand a reliable water supply at crucial times to ensure a successful crop. And this is particularly so in Hawke's Bay, with its often very fickle spring and summer rainfall and susceptibility to drought. Initial development work on these crops was undertaken some decades ago during the 1980s and 90s by the New Zealand Tree Crops Association, and continues today with crop-specific groups such as the New Zealand Walnut Group, the Hazelnut Growers and the Chestnut Council. However, all these crops are very much in their infancy and are rather fragmented at present. What they really need is a concentrated growing region where economies of scale and production, along with the close proximity to food processors that already exist around Hastings, would really drive the sector forward. The RWSS irrigation catchment could easily become the hub of the New Zealand tree nut industry, and at the same time provide an environmentally clean solution to the pollution problems that are currently plaguing much of our primary sector's land uses. Again, independent environmental monitoring would need to take place to prove their clean environmental footprint. 3 is to investigate the practicality of two-tier farming, and by two-tier farming I suggest it would be along the lines of tree nut crops with grazing animals beneath. For example, low-line or miniature cattle for beef production, free-range pigs, free-range poultry, and again it has to prove its environmental footprint before it would get the tick, so to speak. And finally, I want to put a note of caution in here based on my own experience. If the RWS were to proceed without strict environmental conditions and some of the irrigation catchment were to convert their land use to intensive dairying, then my own farm can provide an example of what the environment can expect. We own a small property on the northern banks of the Naroro River, and our immediate neighbour is Hawke's Bay Dairies with their intensive dairying operation that is sustained by a large-scale pivot irrigation system. From our property, a large natural spring discharges water into the Naroro River. That water is polluted with nitrates to the extent that it is not suitable for human consumption. Testing of the water from that same spring by the previous owner of this property showed only minimal nitrate presence at a time which predated the Hawke's Bay Dairies operation, meaning at that stage the water was safe for human consumption. Clearly, since the dairy operation has started, the nitrate pollution of the groundwater was almost immediate, primarily sourcing from cow urine from a heavily stocked intensive operation. Subsequent testing of that spring water from our own property and that of Hawke's Bay Dairies by the regional council has confirmed this pollution. Hawke's Bay Dairies has and has always had extensive riparian plantings of mature pines and native scrub along their river boundary, which has obviously had little beneficial effect in lowering groundwater nitrate levels. And if you flick over to the appendixes on the back, you'll see one of them just shows the proposed economics of a hazelnut operation. There's another there which shows the Hawke's Bay Regional Council's own figures from a large spring at the back of Hawke's Bay Dairies, and all the shaded column are all the levels which exceed the New Zealand Department of Health's recommended level for nitrates. So you can see it's pretty extensive. And the very last page shows some of my own testing and that of the regional councils on the spring on my own property, which again shows very similar levels to the spring at the back of Hawke's Bay Dairies. So in summary there, I'll get to the right page. Our primary industries are to a large degree the backbone of the New Zealand economy. However, it is now obvious that many current farming practices are not environmentally sustainable, and that to enhance our position in the world as a trustworthy and reliable producer of top quality foods that is clean and green and sustainable, then we must change our ways. Through the RWSS, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council has the opportunity to demonstrate to the New Zealand farming sector that this can be done. So thanks for your time, guys, and the opportunity to present what I had to say.
Thank you for a fine submission. I'm very interested in the numbers you have. Can I just ask you one question? Must the Regional Council exercise the highest standards of fiduciary duties when making its decision about investing $80 million into the Ruataniwa Water Storage Scheme, and as part of this have a complete and updated business case, as well as councils being able to see for themselves that the 40 conditions precedent are met, such as the 40 million cubic metres, that these are unconditional to take and unconditional to supply?
That's a tough question. It's outside my expertise.
Fair enough. Councillor Scott.
Thank you very much for your submission, Mr. Knowles. Especially through your final statement, it has the opportunity to demonstrate that this can be done. Do you see the value in the RWSS, the consent holder, having control over being able to cut off the water as a beneficial means of ensuring those environmental outcomes can be reached, rather than individual water takers being able to have to achieve compliance individually?
So I don't quite understand what you're saying.
The consents for the scheme,
yeah.
The operator of the consent is able to shut off water if the if the conditions are not met, environmental conditions are not met? Do you see that as an advantage to being able to lift environmental practice?
I would see. I think that was a tough one because I mean, having been a farmer myself, if the regional council was suddenly to shut off my water, even if I was struggling with compliance, all it would do is probably kill my crop. So I don't really see that as being an advantage. I think that would be too heavy-handed, but there should be. Certainly, I mean, if I was a farmer that was, polluting on a regular basis and exceeding my my nutrient management guidelines, there should be some teeth there to say, well, we're going to terminate your consent. But it shouldn't be able to do it.
It's like a rugby game.
Without any warning, that's for sure.
I'm just trying to force the chairman to give me that little leverage here. Can I ask this one question?
With a penalty at over full time.
Yeah, penalty over. I was there. Essentially, what you're saying is that the farming needs to work and can work within the strict environmental guidelines as set down by the Board of Inquiry. Therefore, my question is, do you agree with our former speaker, Mr. Watts, that pessimists see difficulty in every opportunity and optimists see opportunity in every difficulty?
Probably, yeah.
Thank you.
Good man. Thank you, Mr. Knowles.
Thanks.
I'm not sure if that was a full-time penalty question. Councillor